setting up. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Everyday Riches Show. I am so excited that you're here, and we have a great guest on today, and plus a fabulous co-host with the mostest, because Jason is on vacation. So here's my friend Carol. Anyways, welcome to the show, and we are so excited that you are here. And so I'm Barbara Ellison. I am a transformational life trainer, and I'm on a mission to make happiness the norm rather than the exception, because I truly believe that each and every one of us, whether you are a line worker or a CEO, you deserve to lead a happy, healthy, financially free, abundant life. And that's what this show is about, finding the riches in the everyday. So, and this is my good friend and buddy, fellow podcast host on another show, Carol Henderson from Life by Design. So Carol, good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jason, very gracious for you to let me fill in for you. Have fun on your vacation. So anyway, I'm Carol Henderson. I do have Life by Design, and I help people to live the second half of their life better than the first half. And I do that spirit, soul, and body. So, all three of those areas need to be totally in alignment with each other to be your best. Now, that's not to say they're always exact all the time, because it's a pendulum swing, and you may focus on one and then go to another, but as long as you're spiraling up in every area, that's the goal, is that each day you do better than you did the day before. And so if you're having a struggle in any of those areas, I'm your girl.
Yes, absolutely, does fabulous things. Anyways, Angie, I am so glad that you are here. Angie was very gracious. This last week, Jason was so totally sick, and she just said, she says, oh yeah, I can come on next week. So this is now next week. And so this is very fun. So Angie Barrett, tell us about you, how you came to be, all the things that are making you, you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Angie Barrett, and I am a trauma-informed movement coach. I teach people how to use movement and play to release stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma from their bodies so that they can have more peace, more healing, and more joy in their lives.
Okay.
So how did I get to that? That's kind of a very unusual pathway, I would say. I am a child abuse survivor. I experienced pretty horrific child abuse when I was little, and I had no memory of it until about 7 years ago. And about 7 years ago, I had a pretty substantial mental breakdown. Let me back up. So I went through my life. I became a registered nurse. I am a registered nurse, worked in emergency departments. I worked in ICUs. And I've worked with people in the worst times of their lives, in emergencies, in sick situations. So I've been around a lot of trauma additionally. And then about 7 years ago, I had a mental breakdown and really started struggling because memories of my child abuse came back. And so I started on a journey to heal from this horrible abuse that I didn't know that I had. I just knew I had pain inside of me, and I never could quite get rid of it. Right. And as I was on my journey to heal, I have practiced yoga. I have done yoga for 20 plus years. I became a trauma-informed yoga instructor because I wanted to learn how to teach yoga and movement in a way that was really more soothing to people's bodies, because a lot of times yoga can be actually very triggering for people. And so I became a trauma-informed yoga instructor coach, and that has evolved into me creating a way of using play and movement to help people to be able to heal from their traumas in ways that feels safe and like they're in control, as well as just release the everyday stressors, the anxieties, the everyday life stuff. So it doesn't have to be big trauma. It's even the everyday life stuff.
Wow. And so important, because everybody processes trauma differently.
Yes.
And there are some healthy ways, and there are some really unhealthy ways to handle that. So that's why that's one of the things that we want people to know about, the healthier ways. Like with me, I'm in the wellness space. So
Yes.
let's do some nutritional things to get you to handle stress better. But you know what? Everybody is different. So how do people start? Like, what's the things that they can do to start?
I'm going to take it back even a little bit more and say the first step is acknowledging that we all have trauma, and it doesn't have to be trauma. So there's two different types of trauma or classifications. And there's trauma with a big T and trauma with a lowercase t. So trauma with a big T typically involves things like abuse, car accidents, medical procedures, big events that happen in people's lives that you can pinpoint and say, yep, that was traumatic for me. Trauma with the lowercase t involves those kind of everyday low-grade stressors that just never really go away. Our body's constantly having to be in a state of defensiveness, especially right now, worries about money, the economy, things like that can create trauma when we don't have outlets or ways to let our body release that stress. And particularly worries about money, that's a big one. Family expectations, no real kind of definitive thing, but high expectations that you feel like you can never achieve, or whatever they may be. So trauma with the lowercase t versus trauma with a capital T. And so by starting to recognize that we all have some level of trauma gives us permission to feel those feelings of whatever may be coming up. And by allowing us to feel those feelings, we start to be able to tap into the energy or the idea of allowing ourselves to heal. So for me, that's the first place that I recommend people start. And then to start to move into finding ways of using movement or getting into our bodies that helps us but feels safe. A lot of times for many of us, movement doesn't feel safe. And that is a physiologic pre-programmed response for us. It's part of our nervous system protecting us. When we get overwhelmed, we automatically go into shutdown. When our bodies can't handle it, our minds, our brains, everything can't handle it, we go into shutdown. And that's our body's way of protecting us from things that are too overwhelming. And the way that I describe it is, have you ever seen a goat get startled? A goat gets startled, their legs shoot out, and they freeze and fall to the side. And that's what happens to us as humans, but we're a little more sophisticated when we do that. A lot of times our brains will just shut off. We disconnect from our bodies. We don't want to feel emotions. One of my ways of disconnecting is I'll binge watch an entire series on Netflix or Prime, Amazon Prime, or we numb out with substances, whatever that substance may be, food, alcohol, whatever that is, but that's our body trying to protect us. And so by learning what signs or that we are checked out from our body or that we just can't handle what's happening, and then starting to do some little movements can bring us back into the present moment, but in a way that we feel like we have control. Does that make sense?
And I want to bring up another stress that people might not think about, but born and raised in the Panhandle of Texas, married Keith, had a couple of babies, and we ended up moving to Dallas. And so you think of a move and a promotion, all that as being a good thing. And it wasn't until after we moved back that I realized what all was going on. But he started having ear infections. My middle son started having ear infection. The third one was born down there, but the middle one ended up having ear infections, and it was a constant thing. And it was the stress of the move and the lack that I didn't up their vitamin C. I didn't, I knew about nutrition, but I didn't know what I didn't know of either. And of course, that's still true. We're all learning.
Right.
But back then I knew way less than I know on nutrition. So you think, oh, this is a good thing. So we had a new house. We walked in and remodeled it. He started driving into town, about a 30-minute drive. If he left, if there was a 5-minute window that he could leave in the morning and get to town decently. That 5-minute, we lived in the Colony, which is a little suburb. Now it's a bigger suburb, but that Colony was just opening up. I mean, we moved in the day the Stop and Rob opened. But anyway, and so there was that 5 minute window that if he wasn't out the door, he was in a literal line, bumper to bumper, all the way into Dallas, which was about 30 miles. And, you know, so all of that is good stress, you know, but our bodies don't always differentiate that good or what we perceive as good stress from bad stress. And it wasn't a big trauma like a child abuse trauma, but it was
Yeah.
it was bigger than the little day-to-day things. I think the day-to-day ones can be more destructive
Right.
because you don't recognize them. You know, the money, the school, the holidays.
The holidays, yes.
You
Mhm.
know, we think,
Yeah.
oh, it's the holidays. How many people are stressed because they commit to too many parties, to go into too many places? They don't watch their nutrition. They're eating the sugary goodies. They're eating too much of even the good stuff, putting on weight. And then they see the scales and they're going, oh my goodness. You know, it's like a snowball effect of stress on
Yeah.
our
Well,
lives.
even with the holidays, those of us who don't, I'm not Christian, so I don't celebrate Christmas. And so the stress of being different, of not being a
Right.
part of the group of what many people around are celebrating. The holidays are an incredibly challenging time. Both
Right.
big T trauma, little T trauma, middle T trauma, all of the above,
Yeah,
depending on
yeah.
where on the spectrum
Right.
you sit in
Right.
terms of holidays. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and when just like on yours, you know, one of my sons, you know, he's not Jewish, but he's a Christian Jew, I guess is the best way to put it, that he does the feast, but they do Hanukkah instead of Christmas.
Mm.
So then it comes in the whole thing of, do you do trees or do you do menorah? Do you know, and the
Right.
whole family dynamic
Yeah.
is hard during the seasons.
Yeah. And even just some of the traumas of just how people celebrate, just the
Mhm.
little things. Well, what do you mean you're not having turkey?
Yes.
We had brisket for Christmas dinner.
We
My
did too.
sister, I was talking to my sister yesterday. She said, this was just really an unusual Christmas. She said, we had tacos
Well,
because
and
her,
it's
yeah, just
tamales are common down here. Tamales
or
are
they
very
had
common.
enchiladas. They had enchiladas, I guess. Because her daughter, excuse me, is works for a Crown Corporation in Canada, and they had a big thing that she had to take care of. That it didn't matter. It didn't matter that it was Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So she was on the phone literally for 2 days, taking care of this event that had happened in this corporation. And my sister said, well, I'm not, what are we going to do? And Veronica, she said, I got to their house and she had a recipe out there for enchiladas. She said, I've never made enchiladas, but she had never made enchiladas. So there's Liz, Christmas Day, trying to make enchiladas that she's never made before. It's Christmas. What happened to turkey?
I mean, turkey would have been the easy one.
And probably turkey would have been easier, but right at that moment, there was no time to shop because of this big thing that happened in the corporation. And Liz just said, well, it's just like, well, we're just going with it. Oh, well.
Yeah.
And so they did, because it's not about the food, but sometimes but it was a little bit more stressful for her because it was just so different. She said, I've never made enchiladas.
Well,
What?
and to cook a brand new thing to me is stressful.
Is the stressful
know?
thing. And my sister's
And
a
I'm
good
a good
cook.
cook, and I cook almost all of our meals because we live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But a brand new recipe on Christmas when you
New
have company come in, it's like, let's check the traumas you choose.
Right. And so what I want to say is that's where our bodies and our nervous systems come into that. We shut down and we just function. And so what happens is, as we're doing that, we just stuff down those emotions in order to function, in order to survive. And as we stuff those emotions down, kind of like I said, the goat freezing, as we just continue to move, That's actual energy. That's actual inertia that's buildup. The way that I describe it, I'm going to come back to trauma for just a minute, just because I love talking about it. And this is a perfect example of, little stressors that we may not realize that are building up and adding up. The best way to understand what our body's doing in times like that is, it's called the hand brain model by a psychologist by the name of Dr. Dan Siegel. And I'm going to demonstrate, I'm a visual learner. So if you take your hand, fold your thumb in, and then wrap your fingers on top of it, this is your brain. So if you do the two halves, it's the two halves of your brain. We have two sides. And we're going to cut it in half. And we're going to only look at one side because the other side, they're relatively identical. So this inside portion of our thumb it's called our limbic system, which is where our fight or flight system is held. Okay. This is where, when we feel stress, anxiety, anything like that, this part gets activated. The fingers wrapped on top are our rational thinking part of our brain. This is where we make connections. This is where we're in our most adult, our most grown-up parts of our brain. We're in our intellectual part, not our emotional part. So we're walking along, we're trying to function in our rational everyday brain. Something happens that triggers into our fight or flight. So, for example, Christmas, having to make a new recipe that you've never made before. That's going to activate us. We flip our lid and we come into our emotional brain. And when we come into our emotional brain or our fight or flight center, our body's actually preparing us to run, to get away, to fight or flight. So our body's releasing cortisol, it's releasing adrenaline, it's releasing hormones, getting us ready to run, to fight or to flee. So we actually are producing energy in our body. What we normally do is we stuff that down because we don't want to feel it. It's uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it disappears. That means it just gets stuffed down with however we stuff it. And then if we continue on in this and we don't actually find a healthy way to let it out, we move down into our wrist or the brainstem, which is the part of our brain that is where we go into shutdown or freeze. And when we're here, our body's actually releasing hormones to numb us out, because this is the part where our body's accepting that, okay, we're overwhelmed, death is coming, we just don't want to feel anything, we're going to shut down and numb us. So coming down into that state, that's where we go into overwhelm and we shut down. And like I mentioned earlier, we zone out however we're going to zone out. And the only way to healthy move back into bringing the rational brain back online is to go back through fight or flight. So we have to find a way to release that energy and then to bring our rational thinking brain back online. So doing things like movement, that's why I got so involved in movement, is a way to actually release that energy that we have, to release that buildup of this fight or flight that our body's actually trying to protect us. And so to bring that rational thinking brain back online without stuffing everything down and waiting for something little to trigger us, where we flip our lid. Have you ever flipped your lid and you're like, I have no idea why I just got so upset over something that's so little and doesn't matter? But that's because we're stuffing things down, and it's just one tiny little thing that makes us flip our lid. Right. So that's how
I always think of it as, who was that screaming Mimi that just ran by?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And we all are that screaming Mimi at some point, because unless we find ways to release that buildup of energy, we're just going to flip our lid. And it's like, I describe it like as a pressure cooker. We need to find a way to release that pressure valve, or it's just going to build up until the top explodes.
Wow. That's a great way of
so fabulous teaching. Yes.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. Thank you.
We'll have to use that.
So good. Yes.
And so movement
that takes talk to the hand to a whole nother level.
It really does, doesn't it? Yes.
You just lost it.
Yeah, you flip your lid and talk to that hand, because I am in
that thumb is coming out. It's going to talk to them.
And one of the things that I do positive intelligence, and one of the things that I was on my things that you do every day was that it takes 3 positives to offset 1 negative. So when you have 1 negative thought, and how much of stuff starts with our thoughts,
Yeah.
So when you have one negative thought, you need to have three to offset it.
Mhm.
And one of their explanation of it is back in the day, where that fight or flight, the Neanderthals or the cavemen, they had to remember the color of a poisonous snake, but the chances of them remembering how pretty a butterfly was it was more important to remember. So that's why it takes three, because our brain will take three to offset one, three positives to offset that one negative that we're already starting to feel. And it
Well,
was
and
like,
think
oh,
about it
wow.
as a child, as
Mm.
a child, how many times do you tell a little toddler no? And how many times do you say yes? And so that no, that don't, that, all that
Stop.
negative,
That
it,
stop.
yes, stop that, don't do that, quit, there, and so it's just think about how free an 18-month-old is and somebody just turning two. And think about by the time they start school 7 and 8, so often they're turned in because and I'm assuming every no to them is a trauma.
It can be, absolutely.
Yeah,
Wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I hadn't really either. I want to touch that hot cup of coffee. No, you can't do that. No, you can't drink out of my glass. No, you can't throw all your toys in the floor. So as we mature, think about how a grandchild treats the kids as opposed to a child. Honey,
Mm.
let's put our toys up. Let's not do that instead of don't do that. Don't,
Right.
and a friend of ours, Barbara and I go on a call every morning. And the other day we were talking about, and you may have to help me with this verbiage, Barbara, that, when you walk into a CEO's office and they just start saying, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, as opposed to, you've done really well, and sandwiching what you need to do
Right.
within praise, you want to do better. You want to not disappoint,
Exactly.
as opposed to up your nose with the rubber hose. I'll do it.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens. And it's just so many more people are becoming aware of how the power, like we had one of our guests on, the power of your words.
Yeah.
That was eye-opening of how powerful our words actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And things that we don't even think, like one of the things that I have taken out of my vocabulary is saying, oh, no worries.
Mm-hmm.
No, because the universe doesn't hear the no part. You're just asking for more worries. And so one of the things for me now, hey, it's all good. Or and people say, oh, no problem. It's all good. And I've called Carol on it several
She
times.
calls me on it all the time.
It's like, yeah, it's like, it's all good. The power of your words. And so, and I truly believe that comes down to also the power of movement. Like I'm thinking to myself, the last time I remember zoning out, and I sat down and I watched, I think, a season of Chesapeake Shores. Because I had just had it up to here of trying to get stuff done, and it was just not coming together as quickly or as easily as what I thought it was.
So I'm gonna come back to movement, and with that, and kind of along the concept of the power of words, it's also the power of our thoughts. So like you were mentioning, Carol, every time a child is told no, or every time something happens to us as a child, we form a negative belief or a negative cognition about ourselves. So for example, and I've experienced this both myself, and I work with my clients this way. So one of the negative beliefs that I formed as a child was that I can't do anything right. And it was because I was told no all the time. And so that is a negative belief that I have that was subconscious. I didn't realize that I was always thinking that I can't do anything right. But then when anything happened that went wrong, I automatically went to that negative belief that I can't do anything right.
And it reinforced it.
It reinforced it. Yeah. But it was on a subconscious level. And it wasn't until I started peeling those thoughts back and realizing that, oh, no, wait, And I couldn't peel those thoughts back without being involved in some movement, because trying to even think of I can do things right was so uncomfortable. It would put me into shutdown mode. But if I was doing something simple, like even just bringing my hands out and together, and Barb, you asked me earlier, what's
Oh,
something
yeah.
that people can
Yes,
do
you
to
do.
start? And this is one that I will oftentimes do with my clients, is just take your hands out and together and start to think, I'm doing the best I can. Instead of I do everything wrong, I'm doing the best I can.
Oh.
And so say that over and over and over again as you're doing this. Our nervous systems like rhythmic and repetitive movement. So when we're in overwhelm and shutdown, something small, but that's rhythmic and repetitive. And then after a few minutes, your body starts to open up a little bit more. And then maybe you can bring your arms apart and say, I'm doing the best I can, which is good enough. I'm doing the best I can,
Okay.
which is good enough. And so it's that rhythmic, repetitive, but peeling apart all the layers of trauma and of all the layers of everything that we were told when we were little, when we were told when we were grown-ups, when we were told wherever, however, that reinforces those negative beliefs that we get as children. Adding this movement in releases that pile up of energy that I was talking about earlier, which enables us to kind of give space to be like, oh, no, wait, maybe I can start to look at something a little bit differently rather than just automatically shut down. And so this is one of the ones that I regularly will start with my clients.
Oh, I'll have to try that, because there are so many times where for myself, let's be honest, I get into the, Barbara, what's wrong with you that you can't get that you can't do this?
And so the negative belief for you would be, there's something wrong with me.
Something's wrong with me. And that's one of the things. And I remember one day I was doing a tech thing, and I called Carol and I said, Carol, you wouldn't believe I've had a revelation. As I said, I've been struggling with doing this. And I was getting to the point where, what's wrong with you that you can't do it? But then I asked the right question, are you supposed to be doing it? And the answer was no. I was trying to do something that I wasn't supposed to be doing in the first place. And that was an absolute revelation to me. Because why was I feeling what's wrong with you?
And see, my go-to is, you just need to pursue, you just need to work harder, you just need to do it. And we had this weekend. It's like this cold weather. Barbara had to go into work unexpectedly. Well, not totally unexpectedly, because they knew the weather was coming. But, and we're in the middle of launching our YouTube channel. And so we're both working on it on two different sides of it and everything. And then the weather came and I just shut down. And it was no other reason than, it's Christmas. I'll just sit here with Keith. And I could have been working. Well, actually, we needed to know something, and we were going to get with Jason. Who got sick,
and then he was
and
so
she
sick.
said, "Don't do any more till we talk to Jason." And so instead of, a couple of times I said, "Have you talked to Jason?" And it's like, no. So finally I thought, okay, we're going to move on with this. We're going to do it. We'll figure it out on the backside. And so, we are getting it done. We had to move some dates. We had to change some things. But my thing is getting frustrated with me that I didn't push through sooner, that I'm in the crunch, in the pinch, because I didn't do the little steps every day that I knew I should do. And I just I waited on somebody else.
Yeah. And that's where the blame comes in. And that's the trauma too, because life happens.
Mm-hmm. And I was an only child. So it's like, if something didn't happen, something didn't get done, it was my fault. So I had no.
And that's your thing.
Yeah. And one time my oldest son goes, doggy dude it. He didn't have any brothers yet and stuff. And he, they're all a year apart. And I said, what happened? He goes, doggy dude it. He had the dog to blame. So
yeah.
But those are those negative beliefs that we form that are automatic go-tos that we may not realize that we're going to. And so movement, and especially playful movement, what I do with my clients is we'll stomp around like an elephant. We'll pretend to be an elephant and stomp around. And so I've worked with a client who felt like they didn't deserve to be big. They had to be very small because of whatever, they had to not be big. And so we'll stomp around like an elephant. And so by doing some sort of movement, whether it's small movement or stomping around like an elephant, it gives us the ability to step back from that pre-programming that we have in our brain and to be into our bodies, to realize, oh, no, wait, I can be big. I'm safe to be big, or I'm safe to move, or whatever it is, that helps to reprogram in a way that's easier than forcing yourself, like you were talking about earlier, Barb, to think of 3 positive thoughts in the one negative. That can be really challenging when we are in that overwhelmed shutdown state. So to find some sort of movement, if you don't want to do all your hands, do one finger at a time, start.
One of the things I do is
I was fixing to say Barbara does this.
Yeah, exactly. Something I recommend, though, doing it one side and then the other. So because we have 2 sides to our brain, we have 2 halves. The right side of our brain controls the left side of our body, and the left side of our brain controls the right side of our body. So if you do a movement that is one side and then the other, you're activating more areas into the rational thinking part of your brain, which is going to pull you out of that emotional state a little more quickly because you have more areas of your brain activated.
Yeah, I tend to do both hands.
Do both, yeah. So as long as you're doing
that's
both
good.
sides,
All right.
Yeah, it is. It's called a bilateral or side to side or both sided movement because you're activating into more areas of the brain. And so that's why I say both hands, one finger, and then the other, stomp around like an elephant. They're usually, what I do with people is one side and then the other movements, because you're tapping into more areas of that brain, but the sensory stuff. And so you can reprogram, and it is a little bit easier to think of those positive thoughts. When people are stomping around like an elephant, I'll have people pretend to make an elephant noise, like put your arms together and make an elephant,
I can remember doing that as a kid. We had a teacher that's one of the things that she did for us to blow off steam in the classroom.
That's exactly why I do it.
Ahead of her time.
As you're doing that, it's easier to think, oh, that's fun. Oh, okay. I get to, it makes it easier to come up with those positive thoughts rather than that harsh self-criticism for, I can't think of anything positive. I'm a failure. I'm a whatever it is, whatever your negative thought process is that you're going to go down. That's mine, which is why I bring that up. I'm a failure. I can't do anything right. I can't come up with 3 positive things, blah, blah, blah. Whereas when you're just in a sensory, playful mood, it's much easier to come up with those 3 things because you're into your body rather than into the pre-programming that we've had in our brain.
Right. And that
So
pre-programming starts as a kid. As we talked about.
Yeah. Well, it probably starts before birth, because they hear and they know what's going on in the outside world while you're carrying them. They are fully formed humans, and they're all there. Quick question.
Yeah.
You said side to side. Is it better to do this way or this way? I mean, one and then the other, or together?
I think it depends. What I recommend is it depends on your nervous system state, depending on how much of a shutdown you're in. Some people, when I work with them, are in such a shutdown, they can only do one finger at a time. And so it is one at a time. And then it'll get to the point where you can start to do both. And so it really kind of depends on how into your nervous system you are.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And when I work with people, I vary it. So sometimes it will be both at the same time. Sometimes it is one at a time. And that's to mix it up to keep the brain as active as possible. If you're doing the same thing side to side, but then you switch and do one and then the other, it's switching it up on those neurons to cause some different activation or to initiate different activation of the brain nerves. Good question.
And one of the things that I do is, and I have people and my clients to do is, I have them write with their opposite hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I said, and one day I was doing a workshop about writing with your opposite hand. And it was like I said, and your brain is going to be saying to you, oh, what's this? This is hard. I can't do this. This is silly. This isn't going to help anything. And so then afterwards I said, okay, how many of you how many of you heard that voice in your head saying, this was silly, this was stupid, I can't do this, this is hard? And one of the girls, she said, and it said, it totally stopped her.
Mhm.
And I said, so where else has that shown up in your life? And she said, I know. That's what the thought was. It was just so uncomfortable that it stopped her. And I can see where that has impacted other parts of my life.
Right. Well, and we need to introduce Angie to the girl that we had on our aging experts, that she goes into nursing homes and teaches. And it's like, make a triangle with your hand, with your right hand. Now take your left foot and do a circle with your left foot. And it's very difficult to keep the triangle and do the circle with your foot. But she's got all kinds of things like that. Y'all would love to visit.
Yeah, we'll have to put you together.
Okay.
Yeah. And you just don't realize how important it is.
Mhm.
Yes. And I'm gonna come back to the trauma informed piece of it, because that is so much a part of what I do. And it's working to understand why it's so challenging, and understanding that almost gives us permission. So for me, and I see this in my clients as I work with them, understanding that this is a normal physiologic process, that we have these negative thoughts, that we're going to shut down, all those things. By normalizing it almost gives us permission to do it, to feel those things, to shut down, to do all that kind of stuff, and to only come back to moving our fingers rather than thinking, I need to do everything, blah, 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 that this is okay. My body is trying to protect me. My brain is trying to protect me, and it's okay. And it's okay.
That's a really good realization. Thank you, Angie. Yeah, that it truly is. Yeah.
And we all do it. And what I tell my clients is, think of animals. Our nervous systems are the exact same as animals out in the wild. All mammals, we have the same nervous systems. And so we need to come back to our primal, we just have more rational thinking, but our bodies and our nervous systems are still that primal lion out on the Serengeti that is survival. So we need to allow ourselves, let me rephrase that because that's not very trauma informed, by allowing ourselves the opportunity to experience those emotions, it creates space so that we're not blaming ourselves. We're not re-traumatizing ourselves for doing things or for not doing things. Carol, you mentioned earlier that you were thinking that you should be doing this. You should, when you were talking about your YouTube channel. I invite my clients to stop using the word should, because that's putting someone else's, or, that's putting
well, it can even be our own
limitation or expectation. That's not what's happening in the present moment. And so should is a word that I invite people to maybe question and say things instead like, I wish I was doing this rather than I should. There's a bit of a difference. There's a sauce in, like, we were talking about earlier in languaging, but coming back to this trauma informed perspective, when we even tell ourselves, I should be doing this, rather than I wish I was doing this because it would further me along. Do you see the difference? We're traumatizing ourselves, we're shaming, we're blaming ourselves that we're not doing something, which is traumatizing. We re-traumatize ourselves more than probably other people traumatize us as we get older. It's that internal dialogue. And so by shifting and creating that space to allow for the humanness, the mammal, the nervous system state that we can't be in control of everything, it opens up abilities for us to kind of take a breath, to be human, to feel the sensations that we do without this re-trauma of other people or ourselves.
Wow. So true. And I think for myself, I think I just I make everything so complicated rather than, Barbara, just keep it simple.
Well, and so often people blame others for all their problems.
Right.
Take
responsibility.
Yeah. And, but then sometimes we're the hardest on ourselves. Now, yeah, it's like buck stops here.
Right.
And so whether you're healthy or whether you're not healthy, it's whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right. Right. Wow. This has been absolutely an amazing conversation.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
wait. I can't wait to this is so cool.
That was so cool. I never thought of it. And then that this is the brainstem,
Yep.
because and just a simple explanation of what goes on in our brain.
And that it's
And
normal.
it's-
That it's
And that
normal.
it's normal. And that it's a visual explanation
Mhm.
rather than the technical.
Yes.
Well, and the thing is, we are made to see in pictures.
Mhm.
Yes.
If I say elephant, you don't see the word elephant, you see an elephant. If I say, a purple cow, you see a cow. You may have to put it together because it's not something you normally do, but you will see a purple cow. And so, all of that's we visualize, everything is in pictures. And so this is so much better than hearing all the technical terms and even better than seeing the picture with the terms written on it.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan
Lip in your
designed
lid.
yeah, he designed it for children, and I teach it to everybody because that is the most simple way to understand it. Come back to our childlike brains. That is how we learn. And so to have that visual, absolutely. Yeah, Dr. Dan Siegel. I'm not taking credit for it. I just have borrowed it from him. So I will
Didn't
fully
use it.
acknowowledge and give him credit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And so much research has been done. And that's the thing. One of the things that Carol and I mean, we're both in the wellness space. And so one of the things we say is that, science is finally proving what we've been saying for 30 years. And this is no different. They've come up with the scientific evidence that this is how your brain works. This is how the emotions work. Absolutely. So Angie, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is probably the best way. It's angiebarrettmovement.com. And I do spell my last name Berrett. I spell it a little bit differently, but it's angiebarrettmovement.com. I do have a free, short, less than 5-minute movement sequence on there for when you feel like you are going to flip your lid. So if you want to go get it, it's that fun, it's that playful release of energy. And then you can access all my social media from there as well.
Cool beans.
Cool.
Awesome.
So, well, and I want to say something because Laura and I are in the nutritional fields, is sometimes if you can't make a breakthrough with the movement, you may be missing a nutrient. Your body may be needing some sustenance to do the work. And so don't neglect that. That is very, very important to go along with what Angie's teaching.
We're mind, body, soul. I mean, our body is a working mechanism.
Right.
It needs tools. It's like a car needs gas and oil. Well, our bodies are no different. One of the things the analogy that I use though is like, but my dummy light will come on in my car saying, okay, Barbara, go get an oil change. Our symptoms in our bodies, that's the dummy lights.
Exactly.
Those are the dummy lights. That's the thing that's telling you that there is something wrong. And with you have the same thing, that stress you have, that it's your body is saying there's something wrong.
Yes. And if you're driving a high-end sports car, you're not going to go put regular gas in it. Or you're not going to think, well, I like diesel better. I'm going to go put diesel in my gasoline car. You'll wreck it. And the stress levels will go through the roof because you're not healthy. So, I mean, if you're living on ding dongs, ho-hos, and McDonald's, you may need to rethink what gasoline you're putting in that car that you've been given to drive, because it's an amazing vehicle that we drive, and we all have one, but it's the only one we get. We don't get to go trade it in for a new one. So, do what you need to do to make it work the best. both
Yeah.
nutritionally and emotionally with all the
Yeah,
flipping
how
your
our brain
lid
works.
stuff.
And I'm going to come back, start small. If you're feeling overwhelmed, even if it's not movement, start with something small, changing whether it's nutrition, whether it's movement, whatever it is, start with something small if you feel overwhelmed. Because if
Yeah.
you try and go from 0 to 100,
Exactly.
that doesn't work oftentimes for most of us, and we're going to shut down and then just keep re-traumatizing ourselves.
Right.
So
You
just
know,
remember,
and in
little.
nutrition, water, you know, if you're
Yeah.
drinking Cokes and you're drinking even tea and coffee, start drinking water. Add a glass of water a day to your regimen. Plain water, not tap water, but plain water, nothing in it. And people tell me, they'll say, "Oh, well, there's water in tea." Well, it doesn't matter. You know, if you've got your best sweater on and it's white, what are you going to wash it in? Water or tea or coffee or Coke? You know, those things don't.
I know she's been after me and I've been very much better. I'm just
You
hardly.
had good, much better.
I think I've had one Diet Coke in the last probably the last month.
But start little, drink more
Start
water.
little. Yeah.
Right.
And be compassionate on yourself.
Yeah.
And be compassionate, because we are ones that traumatize ourselves more than
Right.
others do.
Right. You know, and change your mindset that water is compassionate. We tend to think, oh, that ho-ho or that pumpkin pie, pecan pie, that's compassionate. It'll treat me. Well, yeah, it will for the moment. Have it, enjoy the holiday, drink an extra glass of water.
So,
Easy and almost free.
anyways, ladies, this has been it. Angie, thank you so much for coming. And Carol, of course, thank you so much for being my co-host with the mostest.
Thank you for asking.
And well, hey, you know what? Jason yesterday sent me a note and said, Barb, I feel so bad that just Gracie surprised me with this. And I said, oh, that's okay. I'll tell Carol she's going to come on. So I was like, Carol, can you come on? And of course she does. And, you know, but that's the beauty of having a friendship and of just, you know, just being aware that she could just at the drop of a hat co-host. So Angie, this was great. We will have you on our shows. Anyways, everybody have an awesome day. Happy New Year.
Yes.
You know, this is we're going into New Year's, and you know, this is the best time of the year.
Yeah. And it's the first day of the rest of your life.
First day of the rest of
you
your
can
life.
Start what Angie's saying with just a little movement. Start with reaching out to her and getting that free, you know.
That free gift. Yes,
everybody's concerned
absolutely.
about money now. She's got a free class. So reach out and start the movement, start the change now. Everybody tries to make these big resolutions for New Year's. You know, I love that saying is I'm going to open a new business, a fitness center. It's going to be called Resolutions for the first 2 weeks, and then it's going to be a bar. 2 weeks is about how long resolutions last. So don't try to do the big things. Do little things and stick with them.
Yeah. So everybody have an awesome day. Thanks again.
Bye.
Just like, share, comment, share this out to people. If you know anybody that has a little bit of a trauma going on in their lives, hey, I just heard this thing. So share it out, comment. Absolutely would love to